Hello, everyone. Welcome to Engaged Citizens. This is your host, Sharrie Ryan. I am meeting tonight with Anthony Sorace he is running for House District 31 here in Columbia County and parts of Washington County, correct? Is that what they include?
And a little bit of Multnomah County, and weirdly 28 voters in Yamhill County. I did not draw the
Okay.
lines.
Their lines are all reconfigured.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for being with me and just taking your time out to share some info about you. My goal is like getting this info out so that people can learn about, our candidates and who's running and such. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Anthony? Like, your family, if you're married, and how long have you lived in this district, etc.
yeah. So I grew up out east. I grew up in New Jersey and then kind of moved around a while for work. And My partner has been out here for about 12 years. She's a family medicine physician at OHSU. She moved out here for the job. And then, as far as I can tell, people move for two reasons: they move for a job or they move for love. And I did not move for the job. So I've been out here for about 5 years when we decided that this was the place we wanted to start our family. We're raising our amazing, intelligent daughter who is
Oh,
just turned 3.
oh,
And we, like I said, this was really the spot we wanted to do that in. We really like being able to do that on our farm. We have a bunch of sheep and chickens and one llama, and lots of woods to wander around in. It's a really great environment for that.
love
And of
it.
course, the
Love it.
communities that we're in, it's just a really great place for
Yeah.
for raising a family.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And a llama. So, in my research, and this is not quite extensive, let's be real, but what a state rep does. And, I know that, when you look this up and you find out different, just explanations, is that you are the middle person between the senator and the constituents and just different other political happenings and government happenings in the local, district. Um, can you tell us a little bit about what, day to day that would be like if you were voted in? Like, what does that look like to you?
Yeah. It's not really about a relationship to the senators.
Yeah.
Both the senators and the representatives are expected to have like a direct relationship with their constituents. The
Okay.
senators simply have twice as large districts, and they serve for 6 years instead of 2 years. There's some differences in terms of like the specific topics and the committee structures, and the bills will come up in one house versus the other. But In terms of the sort of structure of the job, it's really pretty similar.
Okay.
Day to day, there's Oregon's legislature is a little weird because it's structured as though it's a part-time job. So
Okay.
officially, on paper, your job is what happens in Salem, right? You go
Okay.
to these committee meetings and you sit on the floor of the legislature and you debate and you discuss these bills and you try to get things passed that are going to
Mhm.
help people in your district and across the state in their day-to-day lives. And that's
That's
hugely important, right? But
yeah.
it's really only about a third of what the job actually entails. The
Okay.
rest of it is stuff that happens the rest of the year. Um, so Oregon has this, we alternate years. We do a long session in the odd numbered years and a short session in the even numbered years. So long session is like roughly 6 months. Short session is roughly 6 weeks. Um, and the rest of the time, you're back in your community, making sure that the bills that you try to work on are actually addressing the needs of the people in your community. Uh,
Okay.
you Again, on paper, there's no like official job responsibility for this, but you simply can't do the job well if you're not putting serious effort into that. Um, because otherwise, what are you doing in Salem, right? Like you're
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
off on your own, trying to like make stuff up.
Yeah.
I don't know. Uh, you spend so much of your time talking with your constituents to figure out like what are the needs that actual people have and how do we address them. And sometimes that's as simple as like people tell you like, hey, um, housing prices are too high, right? Just to pick
Yeah.
the thing I probably hear most when I'm going door to door right now. Um, Sometimes it takes a little bit more work to get to underlying issues. Like Oregon has a mental health care crisis.
Mhm.
That's not the kind of thing that people are necessarily as forthcoming about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stigma around it. I show
Mhm.
up at somebody's door, like they're not going to tell me like, oh, I have these mental health problems.
Yeah.
Um, right. So it takes work to figure out what the underlying problems are sometimes. But
Mhm.
fundamentally, that's what it's about is figuring out what the issues that you ought to be working on when you're in Salem. And the last sort of third of the job is really like direct constituent service. So this is like you as a citizen are having problems with some state agency, some bureaucracy, whatnot. You can call your representative or your senator and say, hey, I'm your constituent. I need help with this thing. You know, I've been caught
Yeah.
in this like bureaucratic whatever. Help me out.
Yeah.
And we know, in theory, we know like the right people to call to sort of get things unstuck and get things through the process more
Okay.
effectively.
Okay.
Um, we've been really lucky here in our district and our
Mhm.
county for as long as anyone can remember. We've had a representative and a senator who have been exceptional at that part of things.
Yeah.
Like you know, Betsy Johnson is
Mhm.
famous for this, right? Everybody has a story about her. On this particular point, she's like,
Yeah.
you know, she's just exceptional.
Yeah.
And you know those are really sort of the three parts of the job. There's like the crafting the legislation, which is the sort of high profile thing everybody thinks about. There's the work in your community to figure out what that legislation ought to be, and there's the direct constituent service to like help people with day-to-day problems that they're having.
Great explanation, Anthony. Thank you so much for that. Why do
Yeah,
you want to be, House District 31's rep? Why, why now?
yeah. I mean, fundamentally, I want to make sure that we have a state government that continues to move things forward and improve things for the lives of the people who live here.
Mhm.
Part of that is just, you know, I want this for like my daughter, right? I want to
Yeah.
make sure that she has an education system that's going to function for her
Yeah.
and all of our neighbors. She has access to the healthcare she's going to need, and then it's going to be effective and available and affordable.
Yeah.
But I think this is what everybody wants for themselves and for their families.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we need to make sure that we're taking care of each other. But part of that is, right, the government is just the people. In the
Hmm.
United
Yeah.
States and in Oregon, we have a government of the people. So this is just a
Hmm.
mode of us taking care of each other. We need to
Yeah.
make sure we have a government that does that because there's some of these problems are really big.
Yeah.
Some of these problems
Yeah.
need big coordinated effort at the
Yeah.
level that you know you need government involvement to
Yeah.
improve. Lots of things don't, right? Lots of things in our day-to-day problem or
Yeah.
day-to-day lives are best addressed through family or local community organizations, but there's some
Yeah.
things where you need more organization. So
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we have a state government that continues to put the people of our state first and tries to improve the lives of those people on a day-to-day basis. That's
Yeah.
fundamentally, you know, why I want to serve.
Okay. That's fantastic. And what kind of qualifications do you possess to, do this? And
Yeah, so this is my first time running for anything. Um,
okay.
well, I'm a precinct committee person, uh,
Okay.
which is technically, I guess, I ran for that.
Yeah.
In Columbia County, there's not a lot of competition, uh, and which, by the way, I would encourage everybody if you are involved in either of the two main political parties, you should consider becoming a precinct committee person.
Agreed.
Not enough
Yeah.
people know about like how those work. They're really
Yeah.
the people that sort of shape the direction of each party.
Yeah.
Um, the Republicans and the Democrats, like the specifics of how they work are a little bit
Yeah.
different, but
Yeah.
fundamentally, for both parties, they're people in your community that
Okay.
are elected to serve in the party and sort of drive the direction of the county party and the state party. So if
Yeah.
you're,
Yeah.
want to have impact
Some
on changing that,
say and be
that's how you do
involved,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How long have you been doing that?
Um, I've been a PCP for since 2018.
Okay. Okay. That's awesome.
And that was my first time doing anything political.
Yeah.
I moved out here and I said, I want to start being more involved.
Yeah.
I had been involved in sort of social causes,
Yeah.
the aspects of this outside of government structures.
Okay.
I've done plenty of work with nonprofit organizations and churches doing service work, stuff like
Mhm.
that. But
Okay.
this was really the first time for me saying, I think I can be useful in this role as well.
Mm.
Um, but in terms of like, those technically don't count. It's a little weird. They are elected and they are offices, but under Oregon state law, they are not technically elected offices.
Yeah.
It's a little strange. So this is
Yeah.
my first time running for an actual elected office.
Okay.
In terms of my qualification, so that's sort of the uh, I guess the starting
What brought
point
you to
of
this? Yeah, like
yeah. Yeah. And in terms of like my qualifications personally, my background is I'm an engineer.
okay.
Most of that has been in software and sort of process engineering.
Yeah.
And the way my brain works is I excel at looking at a complicated problem and figuring out how to take it apart into individual pieces that we can work on.
Well, that's a
That's sort
great
of my
skill.
yeah, I mean, I think
Right?
that's my fundamental role as an engineer. And I think in
Yeah.
government, that's really useful. We have things like
Yeah.
people say the housing prices are too high. Like,
Yeah.
okay, great, totally agree.
Yeah.
Um, that's actually a really complicated problem. There's like
Yeah.
undersupply of housing stock. There's weird demand effects from short-term rental markets. Like, there's a ton of different things that play into this. How do
Yeah.
we take it apart into things that we can actually do something about?
Yeah.
So that's sort of why I think I'm going to be good at serving from a skills perspective.
Yeah.
And I have a long history doing, like I said, I was in youth ministry for a really long time.
Okay.
I have a long history of listening to people about their problems and the things that are impacting their lives. I think
Yeah.
that's like the fundamental skill for somebody in
Yeah.
government, particularly in the legislature. You have to be able to do that well to like really hear people.
I like how
And I
you
think,
said that. Like it's a lot of listening,
yeah,
right? That's
yeah,
a big skill. Yeah, listening and, diving into somebody's life.
yeah,
Figuring that out, That's really cool. What do you think are the most like important things in our district that, if you were voted in, where you're like, you know what, these are the things that I really want to focus on or, work on and bring to Salem. What are like kind of, maybe your top three or something?
yeah. Um, so I'll tell you, I've been doing door to door since May. And
Okay.
the easiest way I think to answer that, and we've been doing a lot of it,
Yeah.
I think the easiest way to answer that is the things that I have heard most when I go to people's doors.
Yeah.
And the three things that come up more than anything else are uh, concerns about cost of housing.
Okay.
It's going up faster than people can
Yeah.
keep up with,
Heck yeah.
and that affects everybody from like 18-year-olds getting their first job, trying to like get their feet under them,
Yeah.
to retirees on fixed income.
Yeah.
Um, everybody throughout that spectrum is impacted by this,
Hmm.
and kids, right? Like we
Yeah.
have homeless children,
Yeah.
which is largely driven by this cost of housing problem, and like
Yeah.
that's as the father of a 3-year-old, that breaks my heart. I mean, it should break
Right.
everybody's heart, but
Yes.
it's
Yes.
particularly bad now.
Yeah.
Um, so housing costs. The
Right.
second is our education system. Everybody wants to make sure if you have kids that you're getting a good education for your kids. But
Yeah.
then regardless, that's how we get a skilled and competitive workforce. That's how you
Yeah.
keep your economy strong. Making sure we have a good education system, starting with the little kiddos and going up through uh, post-secondary education, colleges, apprenticeships, trade
Yeah.
schools, those sorts of things. We need to make sure we have that whole spectrum of things taken care of. And there's some
Yeah.
places where we're doing well. There's some places where we're not doing as well.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that I hear most commonly is healthcare related things,
Okay.
especially um, access to mental health care. Oregon is
Yeah.
doing really, really poorly. We're like 46th in the nation,
Oh gosh.
which
Not
is
good to
just
hear.
unacceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
our mental health situation is really, really troubling,
I
and
agree. I agree.
particularly in communities like ours, we have real struggles with access to primary care and addiction services.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
those are sort of the
CCMH, you know.
areas of our healthcare system. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
CCMH does great work, but
Yeah.
um, you know it's one organization. There's
Yes.
just a lot of need, and
Yes.
they are underfunded, they are understaffed.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so those are the
Yeah.
three things that I hear most commonly. So that
Yeah.
those would be my priorities when I get to Salem.
Yeah. Yeah. Bringing that there, right?
Yeah,
So, you have a vast background. I also used to do youth ministry and stuff. So, and I was in Northeast Portland. And so I have like, I get that. I love that, like that listening and just kind of working with people and working with kids too, teenagers, right?
yeah,
How do you propose, like, let's say, Anthony, you're voted in as the state rep, House District 31, for us. And how do you like propose and how does that look for you where you're like, you know what, I want to work with all constituents, no matter if they're, Democrat, which you're, and Republican or Libertarian. How do you kind of see
yeah,
that working for you to like work with reaching across the aisle is the word we use, huh? The
yeah,
phrase.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's a really important question, right? Because
yeah,
whoever's elected to this position is elected for everybody in our district, regardless
yeah,
of whether you voted for me or for somebody else, or didn't
yeah,
vote or can't vote.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, and that's hugely important. And party affiliation just isn't something that is particularly important to me. I've
Okay.
been a Democrat for about 4.5, 5 years now. I
Okay.
grew up in a Republican household. I spent most of my adult life as a independent, not independent party, but independent.
Independent.
Um, and I didn't grow up thinking that any one group is going to have all these answers.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll give you an example just
Good.
in very practical terms, right? Not a hypothetical. Um, the Amani Center is this organization here in Columbia County. They're the Child
Yeah,
Advocacy Center. Um, and they do hugely important work. They do care
yeah.
for kids who have been victims of sexual assault.
Hmm.
They help those kids navigate social services. They help them do like the legal part of things. They have to do like the forensic exams.
Yeah,
It's really hard emotional work, and
yeah,
it's tremendously important.
yeah.
They were good enough to take the time to talk with me 2, 3 weeks ago. We spent like an hour or two talking. It was a great
Okay.
conversation. Mostly it was about them helping me understand the details of their work better, which
Yeah,
I'm hugely grateful for because that's how I do my job well, is by understanding.
yeah.
Um, but part of the meeting was also they said, okay, here's what we're going to ask from you when you get to Salem. Totally
Hmm.
appropriate, right?
Yeah,
They said,
yeah,
here are our two legislative priorities.
yeah,
And they walked me through them. And I said, these are both great. I'm on board. Do you have somebody in the legislature you've been working with today,
yeah,
previously? They said, yeah,
yeah,
here's this person on this issue and this person on this issue. I said,
yeah,
great. I went home, looked up their information, called them both, and said, hey, I had this meeting. These people who are doing important work in my community say you are a good advocate for them. I'd like to work with you.
yeah,
As it turns out, one of those two people was a Democrat and one was a Republican.
yeah.
My messages to them, like I start in that conversation,
Hmm.
doesn't change.
Yeah,
Because if
yeah,
you're a good advocate for somebody in my community, if
yeah,
you're doing something that helps the people in my district, I don't care. You're right.
yeah,
The
yeah,
party affiliation is not what's important. What are we going to
yeah.
do together to improve the lives of the people we live next to?
For
That's
sure.
really the yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah,
really the approach I take to that is like we're going to
yeah,
focus on identifying the problems, and figure out how do we work together to solve them.
Yeah.
And that's true regardless of who's involved in solving those problems or
Yeah.
who's having them on the ground.
I really appreciate how, like, your take on that, Anthony. I just want to tell you that, like, that means a lot to people, right? Because, Columbia County is a mix of a lot of different, parties,
Yeah,
and everyone is very strong about how they feel and what they
yeah,
believe. And so I really appreciate when I find someone else who is like, you know what, it doesn't matter. Let's get this job done. Let's get what is at hand. Like you're like the Amani Center. Like, how do we make sure that the important work that they're doing is able to continue? And that's all that matters,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
That's That is so great, Anthony. I have so enjoyed just hearing about you and also about what a state rep does and just where you see that going and such. So I just want to say thank you for taking your time to meet with me and share with our community about you. I'm going to share your website where people can come and just find the different events you're doing, where you're speaking, and we can follow you. And I just want to say good luck.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the well wishes.
Yes,
Yeah,
you take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
you have a good evening.
You too. Bye.